Hugh Freeze told us that Payton Thorne would be the starter going into fall camp, and then he showed us why.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into today's Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We are dapping it up on the Wednesday edition of the show with Montgomery radio legend Darrell, Dapprich, and we're recording this outside the athletic complex, the football-only facility here, right after we got to see the last viewing window before A-Day. Darrell, and we'll kind of list some of our takeaways and some of our thoughts leading into A-Day. But the biggest news, the biggest storyline, kind of confirms what we already expected, is when Hugh Freeze spoke to the media before practice. He said that Payton Thorne is the expected starter going into fall camp.
If you're an Auburn fan, I think that's the best news you could have hoped for. Let's just be honest about it. We heard that talk after the bowl game that it was going to be an open quarterback competition. That should concern you if you have an incumbent coming back.
Sure.
Somebody with 3 years of Power 5 college football experience. So you want the more experienced guy to separate himself. You want the guy that was your starter last year to be the guy that is your starter this year and has made that leap. And it sounds to me like that's what's happened with Payton Thorne. He's gotten better. This is his first spring with Auburn, going through the terminology and everything that's happening. And so just because he played at Michigan State, people just assumed you could roll the ball out there. It's different. It's different lingo. It's different terminology. I think he looks a lot more comfortable having been here to the spring, and I would hope that he would be the favorite to go into the fall.
Well, we talked about the path to him being better is there. Like you said, spring. I think it's better to play quarterback now at Auburn than it was a year ago because of a lot of different things. Hugh Freeze being more involved in the offense. The receivers are better. The offensive line looks incredible. And we'll get into some of that. But when we went out there, and they threw in front of us more than they typically do. They let us kind of go through one segment, and they said, okay, if you guys promise not to take any videos or anything like that, we'll let you stay longer. So, of course, we all agreed. And he's by far the best passer on this team right now. And, Darrell, it is not close.
Well, here's the thing about Payton Thorne. We saw what he could do when he had a really good offensive line and elite receivers like Keon Coleman around him, right? Well, and maybe it's addition by subtraction. Maybe him and Philip Montgomery didn't jive. Maybe there's rumors of a little bit of some miscommunication, not being on the same page. You get Derek Nix, you bring him in, you get Hugh Freeze more involved in the offense, and you bring him weapons. You've got the same running back room that's going to take a lot of pressure off of you.
Yeah.
You got an offensive line with a big old dude at left tackle and Percy Lewis that can protect you. And you've got another year in the system under your belt. I think he looks just a lot more comfortable, a lot more settled. And we don't ever know, Zach, what the Robbie Ashford factor was with him last year. Was there that I'm looking over my shoulder because a dude that started 6 or 7 games for us last year at any point is going to come in, and, oh, by the way, even if I don't screw up, he's going to come in the red zone, and I'm going to go back to the sidelines and disrupt my flow. That is no longer an issue. He's no longer looking over his shoulder. He can be the dude at the 5-yard line now. And an underrated aspect of Payton Thorne's game that I hope they do not take out of his arsenal is his running ability, because it's a weapon. You combine all those things, and I think we should all be happy. I know that he gets hated on, and there's a lot of talk. I think we should be happy that he's emerging as the dude.
Yeah, and I guess the question is he emerging, or is he just better than everybody else on Auburn's roster? And it seems like they're both kind of happening at the same time. And we saw all these guys make at least 1 or 2 really solid throws, but he was by far the most consistent. Holden had one where he kind of worked it in between 2 defenders. I believe that was to Sam Jackson, if I remember correctly. And then Hank had one where he zipped it out to the right, his right to the sideline to Brandon Frazier right in front of a defender. If it was full speed, I think Brandon Frazier would have gotten laid out. Would he have held on to it? Who knows? But we saw several guys kind of put the ball where it needed to be, but there were a lot of inconsistencies too. And on simple stuff, like towards the end of our viewing window, there was just the quarterbacks throwing to the running backs. It was a simple 10-yard out. And it's like the placement was not there at all. And Thorne wasn't perfect in that either. And that's pretty simple check down stuff. So still by no means do I think he's ready to help Auburn win the SEC, but he's the best that they've got right now.
I'll say this. I was on the sidelines with a former All-SEC defensive back at Auburn in the 80s. I won't mention his name. Today.
Okay.
While we were watching the quarterbacks throw with DBs covering them.
Okay. What did he say?
He was here last year, and he said it's night and day in ball placement with these quarterbacks to what he saw last year.
I believe that.
Night and day. He said they are dropping it in places that they weren't doing last year. That was encouraging to me because he's not a sunshine pumper, and he played defensive back for Pat Dye, so he knows what he's talking about as far as that type of knowledge. So, he did. He said they look improved. They're putting the ball in places you would expect an SEC quarterback to do it. He was encouraged by that.
That's good. That's good, and I'm sure he liked a lot about the defensive backs. We'll talk about them in a moment. Something else, let's stay on the offensive side of the ball, specifically the passing game. Wide receivers are being hurt a lot. And the guys that have kind of been mentioned, we saw just now. We saw Jay Fair. His name was mentioned by name with Hugh Freeze as far as the slew of receivers that have been hurt. Camden Brown is another guy that he mentioned.
And we saw him running routes and catching balls.
Coy Moore was one, and then Caleb Burton was the other. We saw 3 of those 4 today. Did we see Coy out there?
I did not see Coy.
I saw the other 3. The other 3 were out there. And I think Cam Brown and I think Caleb Burton have been out there every time we've been out there. I think we've been able to see them. So, maybe it's not serious stuff, but worth noting that injuries in the wide receiver room continue to kind of hover. That's been a thing every year, it seems like.
Well, and Hugh Freeze mentioned that 2 of the 4 would be back this week, but actually 3 of the 4 got back, so that's good news.
Yeah, if we saw them all today.
But
sure.
I'm going to say this. It seems like it's the usual suspects. I'm not knocking these guys. I'm just saying that, unfortunately, it's guys that need to take that next step.
Yeah.
That are returning guys that a lot of expectations are there for. You got to be on the field to reach those expectations to get to that next level, especially if you're a returning wide receiver. And it seems like some of the guys that were hurt last year, this is not a knock against them. I'm just saying, coincidentally, some of the guys that were hurt last spring seem to be hurt this spring. So I hope they can get on the field in A-Day. We could see them running some routes and
hope so.
Doing some stuff because it's needed. It's needed.
Because that was the big thing. We didn't get to see a whole lot of Cam Brown when we heard so much about him a year ago. I think he was with the 2s last year because of
he dropped to the 3s at one point. I remember
there
being a really big, and now we know why because he had a foot problem.
Like a boot on or something. Yeah. So we'll see. But look, I think Sam Jackson did some good stuff today. He did have some drops, but he had some of the better catches or really the better routes. I'm not gonna say better catches, but the better routes. When Payton Thorne was targeting him, which we've talked to, those guys are roommates. They've got a relationship and a rapport, so I think that's worth noting. And then Robert Lewis, I think he looks a click faster.
He does.
Than a lot of the other guys. And then Cam Coleman's just so smooth. And Cam Coleman is so still raw. He's still so he made a catch, but he got pressed at the line and didn't use his hands at all.
And didn't get separation and still made the catch.
Yeah, and so once he learns how to use those long arms to help generate even more space, and that just comes with coaching and reps in the college level, he's only going to get better.
That is an underrated aspect of why it hurts sometimes to not have successful elite returning receivers.
Yeah.
So they can pass on some of that knowledge to the younger guys.
Sure.
So maybe a guy like Robert Lewis, who's in the slot, He surprised me with his route running today, too.
Doesn't he look just a little bit faster
than
everybody else?
He does. He gets to his spots quicker. He comes out of his breaks with his hips. He just
moves
looks
with
polished.
intention.
He does. That's exactly right.
Moves with intention.
He knows where he's supposed to be, and he gets there in a way that looks like he's done it before. And, again, he's very polished is what it seems like to me. He's very polished.
Yeah.
Of course, he's a fifth-year guy. Played Power 5, played at the G5 level, but still big boy football. So
yeah, and was productive. I mean, he's the most productive receiver on Auburn's roster, whether we like it or not. That's where we're at. All right, I want to talk about some of the guys who stood out on defense, and a great amount of them, but all of them are pretty much in the same position. We'll discuss that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Can you imagine betting anywhere else?
No, I could not.
I can't. FanDuel right now, it's a great time to join because, look, if you want to bet against certain teams in the NCAA tournament in the Final Four, you can.
You can do that.
Go UConn.
Right.
Go UConn, please win. Also, there's futures. The NBA is heating up with the playoffs getting closer. Opening day was last week. It's a great time of the year for sports. So be sure to check out our friends at FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and you'll get some extra money to wager with if your first bet of $5 or more wins. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. All right, Darrell, when we talk about maybe the pleasant surprise of spring, you have to look at the defensive backs. I was talking with another media member during the first part of our viewing window, and it's like he asked, what do I think about what this next transfer portal window is going to look like? And it's like, I think a lot of guys are going to leave, but I don't really know where, because a lot of these guys are so young and their path to playing time is so clean, especially when you look at the defensive backfield. And Darrell, I mean, there's 10 dudes in this room that it seems like that are freshmen or sophomores or redshirt sophomores where you're like, their path to playing time is pretty strong. It's pretty strong. We saw him rotate a lot just in this short window here. But guys like Sylvester Smith, who appears to be the starter over Jaron Thompson at times right now, that's interesting. Champ Anthony appears to be the starting nickel right now as we go into A-Day. We'll see if that actually happens when they roll things out. Caleb Harris is a pleasant surprise. All these corners look really, really good. Tyler Scott, you can't quit looking at him. And obviously, I think the world of Key and Lee. This room, man, despite losing some NFL players and some NFL talent, this room's ready to go.
It's where it could be a blessing and a curse when you have recruiting classes and you go, my gosh, look at all the defensive backs they've gotten. It's great to have that kind of depth, but where are you going to find spots for them to play on the field? And you want to keep everybody happy with playing time.
At least it's DB, though.
It is.
You can play 5 or 6 of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can do that, and you can keep them rotating, but you don't want to lose any of these guys. They've got a lot of potential. One of the things I noticed that I was really, really impressed is how the safeties track the football. The tracer, when they leave one side of the field and they go cover or receive, they really do a good job with the ball in the air. And the interception that J.C. Hart made, and I'm so glad we didn't mention his name, but he's starting to emerge. He was a receiver or a defensive back when he came out of high school. He made a beautiful find the ball over the shoulder kind of, catch on a ball that was thrown to the sideline. Great job.
Little overthrown ball, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he went and got it. He went and tracked it, and he made an over-the-shoulder catch. So really, really high on him. Hope he can get in the rotation as well. Like you said, 9 or 10 guys that can make an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's going to be moments where it's like, oh, my goodness, they're inexperienced. But then there's going to be some moments where it's like, oh, my goodness, they are so talented. They're going to lock some people up. I really believe that. Another thing that I've noticed, and I almost said it the last time we did this, but I didn't want to, put the cart in front of the horse. I wanted to see a little bit more of it. And this is something I'm going to look for at A-Day, and I'm sure listeners will too. These DBs, I'm really hesitant to say this because Auburn people have been saying this for years, but it seems like they're playing the ball in the air, not playing the receiver. And that's something that we haven't seen a whole lot at Auburn, but that's something fans have been screaming for a long time. But all of those interceptions and the pass breakups that we saw, these guys are playing the ball as it's coming down, not looking at the pass catcher.
What that enables you to do, what we saw for years with Auburn playing the man and not the ball, was pass interference calls and losing a lot of 50-50 balls. Because you're not going to get a 50-50 ball if you're not playing the ball, you're playing the man. That's what I'm talking about with the way they're tracing and tracking the ball. They are really going after the ball in the air. And, at some points it could cause – you got to be careful, head on a swivel, collisions, that kind of thing. Yeah. But the aggression with the ball in the air is decidedly different.
Yeah, so I think that's something worth noting. There was a great 50-50 ball scenario. Payton Thorne threw maybe the best throw of the day, in my opinion. It wasn't caught, but Brandon Frazier goes up and he has it in his hands. And as he's going down with it, Eugene Asante continues to fight to force the incompletion. He does that. Brandon Frazier visibly upset with himself. Eugene Asante talking that smack as you would love to see from your linebacker. But it's just kind of those interactions and those reps where it's like, yes, that's good. Obviously, you want the offense to come down with the football. But on the same side of it, you want your linebacker who, let's be honest, we've kind of questioned, can he cover? fighting for the football.
That's going to be a big thing too, because if your linebackers can cover in space and go get tight ends like that, it's going to be so much of an advantage. You know your corners can cover. We've talked about the safeties playing the ball in the air.
Yeah.
If your linebackers can cover in space, it's going to help your defensive line, take a lot of pressure off them. I was very impressed with how athletic the linebackers were in coverage. It was really a nice, I guess, difference from what we're used to seeing as far as just kind of plotters.
Well, you've made the joke, the reference, Durkin's dudes. I mean, this is a linebackers guy. We saw some linebackers at Texas A&M benefit from his tenure there. A dude who looks like a totally different player, Robert Woodyard. I think we've talked about him before, but he looks, I don't know what he's listed at. I would guess 205 is his weight. He looks like a safety to me. But clearly they asked him to do that. There's no way he just lost all that weight, because he was a pretty built guy. But we talked about his first step being a little slow this time a year ago. And so is this the way that they kind of counteracted that? Because he would have been a dude that would have been on my short list of watch for him to transfer after spring. I think he's in the 2 deep now. I don't think he's going to.
Well, he was today. They had Keys and Asante back together, and they had Woodyard next to Mausi, which I think is very interesting, and here's why.
Okay.
The Duke linebacker, very smart, very good in knowing where to be lined up. Who would you want but a guy like that to line up next to help with your growth and your ascension? A guy that knows where you're supposed to be, come alongside me, I'll show you the way.
I'm cool with that.
And then I saw DJ Barber out there as well with Mausi.
So you watched the defensive drills more than I did. Stature-wise, DJ Barber, does he look like a freshman that enrolled early? He does.
He looks a little undersized, but he's so quick. He was very quick off the ball. He was very quick in coverage. He was very quick in closing. But he does look a little – he can get the summer and the fall and the weights is going to be very beneficial to him.
Okay. We saw some other young guys kind of step up, I think, to some extent. We'll discuss who those guys are in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best way to buy tickets, whether it's for sports or the theater or concerts. You've used Game Time.
I have.
I've used Game
I love
Time.
them.
It's a free app. It's very easy to use.
Very easy to use, and it gives you all your choices about virtual seating. You've got a lot of different options of events that you can cover. It's not just sports. Just because it's Game Time, people associate that, but it's not. It's a lot of different things. Concerts, theater, like you said. And I love the fact that, again, you get that view of your seat, what it looks like where you're at.
Yeah, and look, Game Time's really leaning into the fact of like last-minute tickets. You can get some really good deals with Game Time just minutes before an event starts. So be sure to download the Game Time app. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. A guy that stood out to me, and I think Gage Keys needed to go to the sideline for a few seconds, but Malik Blockton was the guy who was next to Jason Jones with that starting defensive line towards the end of our viewing window. And I think he held his own. I think he held his own for the most part. A little undersized. I think that will be fixed by the time fall rolls around. I think he needs 10, 15 more pounds, or at least they need to shape it. I'm not exactly sure. But, you know, he did look a little smaller than the rest of the guys up front. But he held his own. He didn't get pushed around. And so I think that's a good, really good starting point for Malik Blockton.
Defensive line was an area, to be quite honest, when I left here 3 weeks ago, I was very concerned about.
Yeah.
Are you not
anymore?
I'm not as concerned. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
And it's not because of the guys we put out there. It's depth. Anytime you're relying on freshmen to play in the 2 deep, it could be catastrophic. So I still look for Auburn to probably address that in the spring portal.
Okay.
But I liked what I saw a little bit better today with explosiveness off the line, with rotations, like you said, with guys holding their own.
Yeah.
I think that Auburn will be okay by going out and getting a couple guys just from a depth standpoint. But I'm not as concerned as I was when I left 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's good. I'm still concerned about the pass rush to some extent. There was a pass rushing rep that was it was 11 on 11, and Jason Jones made a good move towards, I think Payton Thorne was at quarterback on that rep, and he kind of forced Payton off of his, if it was Payton, whoever was at quarterback, forced him off. You know, he had to move within the pocket, and he threw the ball a little bit quicker than he wanted to. And then Vontrell King-Williams very loudly, the whole complex could hear him saying, out of way, Jason, out of way, and kind of talking him up and kind of highlighting his move there. I thought that was worth noting. To stay on the defensive line just for a second, TJ Lindsey, a guy that Hugh Freeze mentioned a little bit earlier today, talked about his versatility to kind of scoot inside because he keeps getting bigger, and they scooted him inside. He played a little bit of 3 technique, so I think TJ Lindsey is certainly a guy to look at. And then another freshman that caught everybody's eye early when we came out there, Holden Gerner was leading what appears to be the 2s against Air, but an incredible throw and an incredible route to Bryce Kane on the sideline. Caught it, contorted his body, got the toes down, but Bryce Kane had a really solid moment. And then I kind of kept watching him afterwards because it was the last play of the period. But Marcus Davis, the wide receivers coach, goes up to him and said, "Hey, man, Bryce, that's big-time stuff right there." So kind of nice to see the win for Bryce Kane early.
Love him and loved his maturation in his route running. We talked about how everyone that I had heard said he is a little bit ahead of the curve coming out of high school, the way he runs his routes.
Yeah.
And being able to contort your body like that is very heady, and it tells you you're a little bit mature. I also wanted to mention real quick from when we were on the defensive side,
okay,
Jalen McLeod looked unblockable to me.
I saw that note that you put out there. Yeah.
I think people underestimate when you can come and play in a spring and are healthy and aren't behind the 8 ball. And he looks so different and so comfortable with getting these reps and being healthy. He is explosive off the ball. I cannot wait to watch him in the fall. Cannot wait.
Yeah, the concern is, can somebody else step up enough where
he doesn't get double teamed?
He doesn't get double teamed all the time. And I don't know if Keldrick's there yet.
Right.
I don't know if Keldrick Falk is there yet. So who do they go out? Do they go out and get somebody? Because they need players on the defensive line of scrimmage. But you could argue they need defensive tackles, they need 3 techs, they need defensive ends, and they need another, we got to quit calling them jacks, but another buck.
Yeah.
A buck, rusher there. So to me, I don't really know from a personnel standpoint, from like an NIL budget standpoint, can you afford one of all of those? Because I would take it. If you've got room for it and you're like this fake salary cap world that we live in college athletics, like if you can go out and make that happen, you do it.
I guess it's going to depend on who jumps in the portal for Auburn in the spring.
Yeah, there's a bunch of variables that go into this.
But I think you almost have no choice but to do what you just said.
4?
Get one of each. Yeah.
4 guys? I think they need it.
And even if you're just talking about having somebody go back in the 2 deep, or someone who could emerge like an Echo Leota who did a couple years ago,
yeah,
did a sliding role.
Or even like, we haven't mentioned him in a minute. We mentioned him a lot a year ago, but like a Marcus Bragg from a few years ago, where it was just like, this guy's fine, but like, fine is better than most people's 3D.
And helped
what
late.
I mean?
Helped late.
It was so important, and he got better over the course of the year too. So, you need some guys like that. So we'll certainly see what happens. The transfer portal opens on April 16th. So you gotta feel the timing of everything. A-Day this weekend, and then they'll probably have a lot of exit interviews coming out of spring, kind of get the lay of the land with where they are. So it's going to be a busy, very, very busy month of Auburn football goodness, and we'll have you covered every single day here on Locked On Auburn. Darrell, how can people check out everything you got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. I'll be with my good friend Zach Blackerby Friday morning, and then we're covering A-Day for you guys. Don't know the format yet. We just know probably we'll drop it Sunday morning, right? Like a reaction
Probably.
show?
If y'all want it Saturday afternoon, let us know. But that's kind of our plan because that's what we've been doing. But I'm not married to that idea, so let us know. Let us know what you guys want. Until then, please like the video. Please subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.